not to be outdone by the company's improved website and rebranding. We've been doing some work on facts. And we're going to look at that, some of the results of that in this presentation. So the whole team are going to help me present this. We're going to look at why 7.1.1. This is quite a new release. This is a new release quite quickly after 7.1 was out. Why are we doing that? There's a new way of getting facts, and both Praveen will present both these. We've done quite a lot of work on how the equations are presented in facts, which Nick and Peter have been driving. So they will present that. And then we have a thing called the Knowledge Hub, which Nick will present. And then Michael is going to present on our work on adding tooltips to the facts user interface to try to make it more self-explanatory. And then we'll finish up. I'll talk about the work in progress for the rest of the year. So Praveen has shared slides with me, so I have added them. He's added them to the slide deck. So I shall click through the slides when requested, and Praveen is going to talk you through these two things. Oh, Praveen, take it away, please.
Thank you very much, Tom. As was hinted before, so I'm not going to talk about what's in Facts 10.1.1, but rather how changes in the way we're delivering facts, which we decided to implement in this release and in subsequent releases. So next slide, please, Tom. So first of all, why are we doing this new? Why are we changing the way we're releasing facts? So facts releases in the past have been, in my view, relatively bulky. The release schedule is non-deterministic. What I mean by that is we basically took our time to implement a given feature, and maybe we would add some more features, and it would take however long it would take. And when we're completely satisfied with it, we would say, okay, now it's time to create a release, and we release it then. Generally, what that meant was that a given release would get the non-deterministic release schedule of facts kind of meant that, it was as a result of us trying to add more and more features and to make a release more interesting for people. But what this meant, the counter side of this, was that a given release had a lot of features in it, and it would take a lot of time to get that release over to you, the facts user. And there were some issues with this. I mean, bulky releases take much longer to validate. And I mean that both internally on our side and externally as customers, facts users do like to validate our facts software too. And we wanted a quicker validation process. The non-deterministic release schedule also made it harder for IT teams that use organizations that use facts to get the relevant people together to be able to work on deploying the facts release across the organization. So we weren't happy with that. We want a more predictable release schedule so that people know when a release is going to come and can act on it and get that deployed as quickly as possible, validated and deployed as quickly as possible to all the users within the organization. Another problem about facts release has been quite rare, and by rare I mean it was typically over the past couple of years, maybe once a year, a significant release anyway, was that we were not delivering value to facts users. We were creating all these exciting new features that we had tested, but because we had other features that we're working on, those features that were completed were not being deployed to as a new release of Fax. So we really wanted to change that, and the way to change that was to make Fax releases far more frequent and make the releases happen at set times during the year. So our aim this year and in the subsequent years is to deploy 4 releases a year every 3 months. So the first one will be coming up on Monday. So that's our Fax 7.1.1 release. So that's our end of March release. The next one will be 3 months from then, end of June, and end of September, and then mid-December. I think Tom will provide some specific dates. So that way, as a Fax user, as an organization using Fax, you don't necessarily need to upgrade to the version that the latest version of Fax, but we get those releases out there, and if there is something that if there is a feature that you're interested in that release, you can grab it. Next slide, please, Tom. So the other thing that's changed is that there'll be a new place to download Fax. So if you go to the next slide, Tom. Unfortunately, the place where we hosted our Fax releases, called Microsoft App Center, some of you may be familiar with it, is going to disappear on Monday. They've Microsoft had deprecated software, and so we have to find a different way to provide our Fax releases to you. So no more App Center. We've had to create our own. We're basically hosting our releases within a website that we created. So next slide, please, Tom. We created a website called Fax Cloud, which will be the new place where we'll be hosting the releases. The workflow of downloading a release is going to be very, very similar to how it was in App Center. This is the homepage of Fax Cloud. Once we provide the release on Monday, we'll give details on how to access Fax Cloud. But this is what the homepage looks like, and there's a tile there that says where to download Fax. It's the desktop apps, download desktop apps on the bottom left. And if you go to the next slide, Tom, once you click on this tile, you'll get a listing of all the software that Berry Consultants provides, all the versions associated with, so not just Fax, but also, if you're not familiar with, where we also own Apple Neo and Apple Classic and Quotes. So all our software will be hosted in one location, and you'll be able to download your releases here. Yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Thank you, Praveen. We had a question, which is how will the licensing work with the this new, more frequent release schedule? So the licensing, the moment the licensing won't change. So the way the licensing works at the moment is that a license is tied to the first 2 numbers of the version number. So if you've currently got Fax 7.1 deployed and have installed Fax 7.1 licenses, if you install Fax 7.1.1, the same license will work. But if we make a release at 7.2, then as in the past, you'll need a new license. I think we'll use the same sort of policy on the versioning number, which is that we'll update the last number if the change from the previous version is relatively minor, maybe some fixes, maybe a small feature, maybe user interface changes. If there is a really significant increase in functionality, then we like to call that Fax 8. And if just kind of there's one new engine has got some new stuff, then that'll be a sort of 7.2. So I'll mention what we think the version numbers will be of the releases this year, but I'm going to stress later when I cover what's in the pipeline that the flip side of having a deterministic release date and controlling the release date is what is exactly going to be in the release. It's not deterministic, because if it ain't done, then it won't make the release, and we'll have to pull it, and that release will only contain the things that are finished and tested. But yeah, that's enough on that for the moment. So something that's in 7.1.1, which is almost entirely just a user interface release, is some work on the new equations. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then Nick and Peter are going to talk about the equations.
Peter, do you want to drive? Or
yeah, hi everyone. It's okay. I can start sharing my screen, and Nick, feel free to any comments like anytime. So let me see if this is working. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, and okay, so this is a first quick look at the new 7.1.1. It doesn't really appear in the heading here. So I'll just give you an example of what we were working on. We have changed a lot of things that apply to the core design, stage core design, as well as platform file design. I'll just pick one, dichotomous core, and to just to illustrate what we have been working on. We have tried to simplify, for instance, this tab to make clearer terminology. For instance, the control arm, we just always call it the same way, an active comparator arm as well. In the past, there was some different variants of these names. So I'll just add the active comparator and a couple of doses here. So this is the core user interface, which is very useful when you have when you are working with multiple doses, but also when you have independent arms. And I'll skip all the other tabs and go straight to the design tab, where we have those response. So if you have independent arms, you might be interested in this first setting or model here. We don't really call it model, because we are not really modeling anything. We are using the name model in all these others where the doses are somehow linked together. But when they are independent, we just call independent arms. And there is a variant of it in dichotomous setting only, which is the beta binomial setting. So as you can see, we have these three panels here. On the left-hand side, we have the parameters. In the middle, we have some equations, and on the right-hand side, we have a graph. And so now I have here a FAX 7.0, which is the previous release. So I just want to, for instance, let's pick a hierarchical linear model. So we have also modified some of the names of models, hopefully making it easy to understand and using names that are common in practice, like this Emacs, for instance, we have added here. And the simple, what used to be the simple, we have removed the word simple from our names. We thought that was not adding anything. So now the hierarchical linear model, that's the same one. And if you just quickly compare you can see some differences. And our main focus was on these equations panel, which is now written nicely in LaTeX and loaded here as a PDF. And if you're struggling to read, you can just right click on it, and you can see the whole panel much larger. So hopefully the idea is that you can even copy and paste this panel and include in your presentation or report, wherever you need to put some things in. So yeah, in the past, there were several things that we were not completely comfortable with. For instance, many models were using alpha and beta. Beta was also used for, and still used for, the baseline variable, and also in several models for different things. We have tried to unify it now. And for instance, whenever there is like an equation for a dose, we are using A as a zero response, and B as a unit change or slope in this case. And this is now consistent across all the models. So if you would like to compare different models, hopefully it will be much easier to understand. In the past, in previous versions, we had this was the main model here in this panel, and then there were other equations spread out around. Like for the active comparator, for instance, there was an equation here. In the continuous designer, there is a baseline panel which had its own equation, etc. So now everything is in this single panel in the middle, and it's dynamic. So in this case, for instance, we have active comparator. We call it arm index is little d equal to capital D plus 1. And here it's shown as normal distributed. But if you change to hierarchical prior, it automatically updates there. The same happens with the control. At the moment here, the control arm is included in the joint model. But if you want to model it separately, this equation appears specifically, which is specific to the control arm. And this is now happening everywhere. We have also added some text here, interpretation. So hopefully this will be useful for those, for anyone. Well, probably not everyone will not be familiar with some of the models. So yeah, hoping this will be useful. And one of the longer ones, just to give you another example. This is quite a lot of parameters, and in the left-hand panel, we just had this notation that we had there, and we were just talking about this parameter with their notation rather than an explanation. Now we have always added some explanation, some terminology in front of the parameter itself, which will hopefully help to make it easier not to make mistakes. I think that's all from me, Nick.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. There's no way to make the U-shaped model look easy. It's just kind of a beast. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think this.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say this is sort of a long overdue update, and we've tried to be consistent, which is, really was lacking previously. Is that sometimes the notation on the left, where you enter the prior parameters, didn't match the notation on the right, and so we've been, I think, extremely careful to be consistent in all of that within the panel, which should help ease some mental burden of trying to figure out what these things are doing, because the complicated dose response models are complicated.
Yeah, we have even these two-dimensional ones, which are even more complicated. Now, we also made this terminology a bit clearer here, calling things combinations, where there are combinations and not just doses. Yeah. Yeah. Are there any questions? Because I don't see the chat.
No, there aren't any questions. Just one other thing that you could show is that this panel, what we're displaying here, is actually a dynamically generated PDF file. So you can right click on it and actually get the, you can zoom into it, or you can extract it into a separate window. So, where we have, in a few occasions where we get a suffix on a suffix, there's you can now zoom in and clearly see what's been written. Whereas before, it just got a bit blurry.
Yeah, even here without opening the big panel.
And of course, having it in a PDF makes it easy to cut and paste into a document presentation.
Yeah. Can I use that to transition into my part of this that I want to talk about a little bit?
Yeah.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Will you kill your share, Peter, so I can? Yeah. I'm talking about the Knowledge Hub. So part of the changes we wanted to make to improve some of the convenience and lower the the learning curve and stuff that it takes to get comfortable in facts was to improve our documentation. So Peter showed nice equation updates. Sometimes that still might not be quite enough. And you do have to go to the documentation. Facts is not a, brain dead point and click type of application. You're using your brain, you're thinking about stuff when you click through. And so we thought that we would take this opportunity, this sort of transition that we're making, to improve how we let you access the documentation. So I pulled up on the left the Facts Documentation Hub, or the Facts Knowledge Hub. This is under construction in the sense that it changes pretty much every day, but it's also live. So you can access this. You can go to the website docs.berryconsultants.com, and you can see what I'm seeing. It's not, I'm not guaranteeing that it's perfectly stable all the time because we are still updating it, but we have ported all of the documentation that previously was in Microsoft Word files attached to Facts. We've ported all of that over to the web. Okay, so when you go to look for documentation, that should be pretty stable, but any other parts of the website may be being improved as you look at them.
Well, not quite all the documentation. The user guides have been ported, all the user guides, but there's some in the old Facts. There's tutorials and stuff which will be the work of the next couple of months. Yeah, sorry, the user guide documentation, but not the examples and not the case studies. Yeah, thanks. This is the homepage that I'm showing. It is currently called the Facts Knowledge Hub. This may eventually not be specifically targeting facts. Berry Consultants may post things more broadly here. It may be sort of a repository of technical statistical information as we feel like disseminating it in a way that's not writing a big paper. But for now, it's mostly functioning as a facts documentation site. And so that's what it's called. I'm going to skip a lot of the tabs. There's an introduction, getting started with facts. I'm going to focus on documentation. All of the user guides, there's a header on the left that all the user guides have been
ported over here. The content is largely the same as it was before, but is just much more friendly to look at. So I've chosen the core design, calling it phase 2 and 3 here. But virtual subject response, so specifying efficacy for different doses and a continuous endpoint. And I can scroll through this document, and there's things like tooltips where I can highlight and get some context. A lot of the images are similar, but when I get to, so more tooltips, but I get to places with equations and they render really nicely. And so sometimes Fax doesn't give us enough real estate to type out everything we need. For example, this is the correlated simulation of longitudinal data tab. This is a one equation panel in Fax, but it's 10 paragraphs spanning, a bunch of equations here in the user guide. And so if you use Fax and find that it's not quite giving you everything you need to see, the user guide can be a really nice place. It has interpretations of parameters, it has similar equations, and it has some intuition that can be really helpful for filling out those models. And all of the models, hierarchical MMRM VSR, ITP VSR, all of these things exist in the hub. It can be, I can go to the dose response models tab. So this is what Peter was showing. Those equations that Peter showed will be matched here. The notation is a little different right now, but it's by the time we release the new Fax, we'll have this updated. So yeah, all of that is ported over. There's links between pages, like if you're in the seamless design and you're working on it, you're doing a stage design and you want dose response models, there's a link straight to the dose response models page. It's much easier than going back and forth between the different spec documents and the user guides and trying to find whether it's which document it's in. So we hope this is helpful for accessing some of that information. And we're adding to this every day. There's also things like glossary, definition of terms. This used to be spread out across user guides. Our references, that's still a work in progress. As we release things, we release release notes. So this is the 7.1.0 release notes, and they're online, pretty comprehensive. 7.1.1 release notes are still in progress, but we do kind of update them as we make changes. So if you're interested, you can peek at that. Other small things. So we have this idea for concepts. This isn't quite Fax documentation, but we do things a lot that we want to share. And so this might be where we try to share things with you. I'll go to the inverse gamma distribution Fax. We try to give you this central value / weight parameterization of your inverse gamma priors in Fax. It's easier than specifying alpha and beta and then having to calculate what the implicit mean is of that distribution. And so we try to make it easy, but it can be still burdensome to do that. And so we have made a couple of applications that hopefully help in certain cases. I want to specify an inverse gamma distribution with the center of 2 and a weight of 5 groups, and it'll do some calculations and show me that inverse gamma, show me the mode of the distribution, the median, the mean, because this center term is, it's not the mean, it's not the median, it's not the mode, it's something else. And so, you can see the calculations up at the top. So things like this we're working on, and we're going to keep expanding it for the multiple imputation, the longitudinal model linear regression. We also put together an application that you can enter priors in the same way as Fax. Then you enter some observed data. For a subject, for example, and it'll show you, what this imputation model is doing in that context. And so you can explore this and say, okay, I get it now, or I'm still confused. But hopefully, as we generate things like this, it can help you get through some areas of facts that can be difficult. And the documentation does generally link you to these, like when we're explaining what the inverse gamma prior is. Usually there's a little blurb that says, see here for explainer. We have really basic introductions to adaptive trials and Bayesian statistics. These are works in progress. We should probably put, the canonical crane up at the top of this is under construction sort of thing. But we're still working on some of these things that we hope is eventually, a resource for some maybe specific types of adaptive designs that FACS is made to do. There's a blog here as well as my last thing I want to show. We only have a few posts right now, but we do intend on providing updates as we do webinars, as we create cool examples, as we present things relating to facts. You can see here that Tom and Elias presented at ADMTP. And so they posted a little blurb. They posted their slides. Elias posted about the CRM without cohort enrollment, so with constant continuous enrollment, and he talked about backfill, forward fill, and things like that. And so you can view his and go through. So I think the highlight is the documentation. All of the engines have their place in here, and hopefully it's helpful in helping you figure out anything that's not self-evident from the user interface that you get in FACS.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Yeah, Ronan, sorry, there was a question about linking to the user guides on the Knowledge Hub from in-software documentation. Yeah, we do have plans for that. We would like to, this is a good point to transition to Michael, but we would like to, in certain areas, allow a link directly to the relevant part of the user guide. We think that would be helpful. So we do have plans for that. It's not in 7.1.1 because we're still getting the URLs and stuff for this resolved, but they're pretty stable now. So I think we'll work on that for the next release. Okay.
Thanks, Nick. So next up is Michael Jackson, and he's going to talk about the tooltips. In fact, some of which you will have already seen popping up as Ito showed you the equations.
And the first thing I want to mention in the when they were covering the equations, it wasn't shown, but if you pop out the equation, you'll notice that the pop-up will update automatically, so you don't have to close it and open it and close it and open it. If you're in fact looking at the equation set closely.
Michael, we actually can't see your pop-up through the share. We can only see it. Oh, now we can. Yep.
And so it, like I said, the pop-up changes with the equations in the back, so you don't have to keep opening and closing it. Yep. So a while back, we started a process of adding tooltips, and we're basically through core. We haven't finished stage design quite yet, but it's quite a task to add all these tooltips. But we have several types of tooltips, and I'll show you those. So the first set we have is on the tabs, the main tabs of the application. And these are just simple descriptions of what the tabs are all about. Then we have the bubbles. The bubbles are designed to stay active or to stay enabled.
Michael, you might need to share your entire screen.
It's not showing the tooltips through your sharing.
Oh.
Yeah, we're just seeing the main screen.
Okay, can you see the tooltips now?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. As I was saying, we have several types of tooltips, and the first set is on the tabs. All the tabs have tooltips at this point. A lot of the tool tabs are shared, so you'll get some tooltips on applications or the engines we haven't quite gotten to yet, but we'll get to all of them. The second type are the bubbles. And the bubbles are intended to stay active or enabled at all times, regardless of if the control that they relate to is enabled or not. It just gives you a better idea. Well, do I need to check that box? So you don't have to check it to read the tooltip. Third type is on our labels and different controls and radio buttons and check boxes. Had some pretty extensive tooltips there. And I think probably just came from the documentation, but all throughout we have those. Of course, somebody's going to say they're in the way. You can go to options, tooltips, and turn it off. So if they get in your way, you have that. Next set is, let's go to allocation. A lot of our columns, we already had tooltips, but we're adding more and making them more descriptive. So if you have a column that you don't quite understand, hover over it and see if we have a tooltip for them. And after that column. And that's really it. That's just those types of tooltips, and they're pretty extensive. A lot of text in there, so should be able. I learn a lot just from reading them. I'm not a statistician or a trial designer, just a developer, but when I get stuck, I can look at these tooltips.
Will you highlight that enable adaptive features one for a sec? I just want to point out a nice feature of this is that sometimes things change in the background of facts. When you click this button, it enables the interims tab. It enables you to do adaptive allocation. Some of that's highlighted here. So it can be nice for things like that, is what's actually going to happen if I click this button.
Quite a few of these explain what it's doing and what it's going to affect. So, and as you know, in facts, when clicking things affects a lot of tabs and forms. So maybe that'll make it clearer. And I think that's it.
Yeah, if you do go into settings and turn off tooltips, Michael will haunt you because he painstakingly went through and added the text to every single control. So at least live with it for a couple hours, or he's gonna haunt your work hours.
Yeah, Scott made us add that.
Yes. It was something that using AppPlan told me was actually how useful a tooltip was for when, because having worked on facts from year zero, I just know it so well. I don't need tooltips, but it was using a slightly foreign package that told me how useful a tooltip was when what exactly does he want me to enter here? And you don't want to go to the user guide and find the place and look it up. If you can just hover over and get information, that is actually very useful. Of course, it's a lot of work, put them in, and Michael's been doing a sterling job. And of course, the other thing you don't want is a tooltip that just repeats what the label says already. So yeah, we've done quite a lot of work to try to make sure the text is actually helpful. As with one of the questions we got asked a moment ago on the Knowledge Hub, I guess one thing that would be nice and ought to be quite simple to do, we'll have a look at it, is to add to each tab a button that just links, that will just go straight to the knowledge hub and the relevant page in the user documentation. So if you need more information about entering a tab rather than just one number, but how the whole thing works, then that was then that would be the kind of the second level, and also it'd get you there, hopefully in one jump. So lastly, so that's all stuff that's part of the 7.1.1 release. And yes, in a sense, none of it's quite complete. There's equations that we haven't got around. I think all the dose response equations are done in FACS core and stage design, but we need to still do some longitudinal model equations. We still need to do enrichment design. So there's a little bit more work there. As we already said in the Knowledge Hub, all the user guides are up, but we now need to do the tutorials and case studies. Tooltips, similarly, FACS core is covered except for multiple endpoint, but we're now working on stage design, which of course is very similar. So those will get rolled out with the coming releases of FACS over the next few months. And this is perhaps a price we pay for having the regular releases. Where something can be incremental, then it might get released in a partial state. Some things which are only partially finished, we won't release until they're completely finished, and we'll talk about those now. So the releases we plan to have end of June, end of September, middle of December. And again, the rule will be that with sufficient cutoff, early in June, early in September, beginning of December, we'll say, okay, these are the things that are sufficiently done. That's what's going to be in the release. We'll make sure the documentation is complete and the regression testing is done. And as Praveen said, one of the problems that we've had that caused such a delay in getting 7.1 out is we had a sort of snowball effect that the longer the release took, the more changes there were. When we did the regression tests, the more differences there were between the new release and the previous release, and manually signing all the differences off got longer and longer. And also, maybe sometimes we actually introduced a problem with the new feature that needed going back and fixing. And that's much easier and quicker to do if you do the testing much closer to the time when the feature is implemented. But hopefully, as Praveen said, this will actually ease our regression testing burden by breaking it up into much more digestible chunks. So the work, we've kind of mentioned this before, but I'll go over it again. These are the things we're looking to do this year. There's, for want of a better phrase, the non-model dose escalation engines, things to simulate the Boyne, MTPI2 and I3+3, these dose escalation methods that rely solely on an estimate of the toxicity at the current dose. We're going to put those under a single unified non-model dose escalation GUI, so it'll be hopefully very easy to kind of flip between them and see what the difference between those are. It will take a little, I'm not sure, well, I'm pretty sure in this release, in the next release, or when this is first released, you won't also be able to easily switch between these and NCRM, unfortunately, because the NCRM is really now rather a large and unique user interface of its own. we might look to try to have ways where we can more easily move things like the scenarios to simulate between the two, but they won't be. I don't think they'll be the same with a unified user interface, including NCRM with the non-model ones. And the other thing that we'll hopefully add is some of the nice graphs that are in NCRM where they're applicable to Boyne and TPI and plus3. We'll make sure they're included in the user interface too. Another piece of work that's well advanced and has been being worked on for easily 6 months now, if not longer, is Fax Core Ordinal. We're getting very aware that we've got a lot of feedback that one of the things that Fax has lacked all these years is really a good way of comparing the results of different designs. And our long-term ambition is to actually be able to do that within Fax. But again, that's quite a big user interface job. We already have the nice package that Elias produced called Airship, which takes simulation results and puts them into trellis plots that can be used for comparing designs. And the idea is we will build probably as either into Airship or as a separate art tool, something that can import results from different designs, put them into a single data frame, put them into Airship, and allow these trellis plots to be constructed. The interesting problems to overcome there is how similar do the designs have to be in order for that to be sensible. We'll have to do things like make sure the same scenarios are present in each design. We'll have to cope with what happens if one design's got more doses than the other and that sort of thing. We're working on some features which are going to make Fax more powerful, but a bit more complicated. These are operational quantities of interest, so that within the decisions you can include testing things like the number of subjects on an arm, the time in the trial, what the current interim is, number of complete on a particular arm, and things like that. And then to better make and in the platform trial, the number of current treatments, and then to be able to include those in decisions, instead of just having a small number of criteria which either all have to be met or only one of them has to be met, as we have currently. We'll add a method for being able to put brackets in the decisions, so you can have some criteria that have to be met, or some other set of criteria that have to be met, or some other set of criteria that have to be met. And that's going to make it possible to have much more powerful and nuanced stopping criteria and decision criteria in Fax. Getting back to trying to make Fax more friendly, we're going to have we have this idea to have some things called quick starts, which means that you can get to the point of running simulations without having to work through the entire Fax interface. And we'll also present using Fax in terms of kind of well understood and conventional trial types, like a fixed trial or a group sequential trial or a trial with sample size reassessment. And there you'll get a small number, 1 or perhaps 2 pages of parameters you need to specify for that type of design. And then the quick start will take those and go away and fully populate the thing in Fax, so you can straight away run simulations, but also then you can add features within Fax to the underlying design, if that's what you want. But hopefully that will enable people to get started with Fax much more quickly, and also use Fax in more conventional settings than they maybe do at the moment. And in line with that, we'll also add some more frequentist analysis, so that people coming to Fax from a more conventional trial design background will see the kind of things that they would expect to see, which, because of Fax's very Bayesian heritage, we never implemented. And we'll be doing more documents on the Knowledge Hub and more work on the tooltips. So I'm not guaranteeing or committing to all this, but this is kind of what I'm hoping for. And this is to try to kind of set your expectations. So in June, we might have the first non-model, like Boyne, TPI2, and the better graphs. We might have a beta version, FACS Ordinal, for those who want to see a beta version. So a beta version will be one that will be pretty much fully working, but it might not have been fully tested. It might not have had all combinations of options tested, and may not have complete documentation. We'll have the operational QIs. We hope to have at least 1 or 2 quick starts, and we'll hope to complete updating the Knowledge Hub, and we'll also have an initial stab at a design comparison tool. And then so that if that's what we do get into in the June release, that feels to me more like a FACS 7.2, maybe even just a FACS 7.1.2. But then in September, we would hope to have the dose escalation models complete, FACS Core Ordinal complete, as well as the operational QIs, have the and/or logic, more quick starts, and possibly also an update to the design comparison tool. And by then, we're looking at a much more significant increase in the functionality, and we'd probably start to call that FACS 8. And then December, partly because it's a shorter cycle, partly because there may be things here we've actually not managed to complete as well as fully as we'd hoped. Maybe they don't get released, or they're only partially available. Maybe there's only some engines with the and/or logic, for instance. So December will be kind of a wrap-up of these. We'll need more frequencies calculations. We'll have completed the tooltips, and we'll hope to have even more quick start guides, maybe even some that we haven't even listed yet. And we just had the question on the chat. So the way it currently works, that would mean that if we call June of 7.2, that would need a new license. If we call December FACS 8, that would need a new license. And if December is 8.0.1, that wouldn't need a new license. Maybe to reduce the burden, the license burden, pushing us to prefer to call June 7.1.2, because that will be covered by a current license. So maybe 1 or 2 licenses in a year. But so there we go. That's the end of our coverage of 7.1.1, which will be on the FACS Cloud download site from Monday, and the Knowledge Hub docs at dockberryconsultants.com is available already.
Before you dismiss everyone, there was one more question that I postponed to the end.
Okay.
About FACS and R's interaction. What are the scope and plans for FACS and R, or R and FACS? And there's a user guide on the Knowledge Hub that is about interfacing with R from FACS, and predominantly that is how to use R to construct plots or to calculate quantities that weren't natively available in FACS is what most of that user guide is about. It's about setting up the interaction, because there's a button in the simulations tab that says open in R, and it'll create a script that loads the data. Essentially, you run the script and it loads the data into your working directory. There's also the open and airship button, which is really interfacing with R just behind the scenes, where it loads data into a Shiny application and we'll run it. There is gossip on the underbelly of the Fax sort of communications about what would it take to go the other way, to include R and Fax. And it's not a very well-rounded thing, so I'm not going to speak on it and make promises publicly, but it's something that's on our mind. And we know that there's more models in the world than we could ever put into Fax. And then people want to be flexible and use their own. And so it's something that's on our mind, but we have to figure out how it would work before we can talk about doing it realistically. So that's something we're discussing in the months to come.
Thank you, Nick. So yes, take a look at the new website. Take a look at the Fax Knowledge Hub. Sign up for the Berry podcasts if you enjoy podcasts while you're out walking, like I do. And we'll see you, I hope, for the Fax webinar end of April. Subject to be confirmed, but it'll be a more conventional technical webinar, I think. Thanks very much.